And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. Verse 4, but thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Since the advent of the aircraft over the last 100 years or so, we have seen people indeed toing and froing. Just a few months ago, there was a software company who showed visually how many planes were in Britain's airspace at any one time. And it pretty much covered the entire map of Great Britain. And that was just a snapshot of one moment in time, which was looking at the amount of aircraft in British airspace. We are definitely living in a time when people travel easily and knowledge is increased to a great extent. On Thursday, last week, we left our home at 12 o'clock lunchtime, and within 13 hours from leaving home, we had touched down in Boston, some 3,500 miles away. The travel was seamless and efficient. We're going to conclude by spending just a few minutes on probably one of the greatest signs of the times that relates to the last 100 years. And that is in relation to the nation of Israel. We looked at Acts 1 earlier, when the apostles asked when the kingdom of Israel would be restored. If I'd had the time this afternoon, we would have looked at the introductory reading of Ezekiel chapter 37, a wonderful prophecy known as the prophecy of dry bones, where scattered Israel, no longer a nation, is prophesied to stand up, and the God of heaven promised that he would put sinews and flesh back on their bones, and that they would revive as a nation once again. And we know that from the Zionist movement of 1898, there was a great expectation for Israel to be given a land. And actually at the time, prior to the Balfour Declaration, there was a huge push towards giving them an area in Africa. But God had not appointed that they should return to, or not return, that they should be set up as a nation in Africa. He had appointed that they should return to their homeland. And that's exactly what happened. They were invited in 1917 to return home, and they started to do that a few years later, and so that by 1921, many of them had started to move back to the land of Israel. I also wanted briefly to look at the 38th chapter of Ezekiel, which refers to Russia essentially becoming the empire of the northern parts. And we know that from that prophecy, we don't have time to look at it, but we know from that prophecy that essentially Gog, that is the Russian host, was to bring a confederacy of the European beast nations, if you like, the Catholic nations, and that they would become the great lord, the one at the top, as that title Rosh means, one at the top. They would become the emperor of that region and go towards, with their armies, towards the land of Israel. As we said, prior to the 1900s, Israel were a scattered people. 1917, under the Balfour Declaration, Britain invited the Jews to return. In 1948, the British mandate gave way to a US mandate that they should officially become recognized as a state once again. In 1967, Jerusalem was given back to them as their capital city. And so we would say that from 1917 onwards, the last 100 years, we have seen the partial fulfillment of the words of the prophet. Israel today is a magnificent nation. We in the UK have lots of their fruit and lots of the vegetables that are exported to our country. Today, Not only are they a magnificent nation, they are in the top 10 economies of the world. But they haven't as yet given any of that credit to their God, the creator of heaven and earth, the author of their salvation. Instead, they still rely upon what they believe they can achieve of their own volition. Tel Aviv is one of the most wicked cities in the world today. Let us turn to Zechariah 13, quickly, verse 8, to bring our remarks to a close. And it shall come to pass that in all the land, saith the Lord, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, but the third shall be left therein. And so, friends, here's God's 7,000-year plan with the earth. The first 6,000 years was to be essentially the kingdoms of men. But soon God will, as we said from the start, no longer wink at their evil doings, but will visibly intervene. He will send his Son back to the earth to topple the nations of the world. Isaiah the prophet in the 26th chapter says, "When thy judgments are in the earth," the people won't have an option. They will learn righteousness. And may heaven speed the day when those acts of violence, when all that is evil and all that is wicked of today shall come to an end, and that time when God's law shall go forth, and the nation shall take hold of the skirt of him that is a Jew, and will have that great desire to go up with that Jew to the mountain, to the house of the God of heaven, to Jesus Christ, the King of the earth, and to be instructed in the ways of God. When indeed at that day there shall be glory to God in the highest, and peace on earth, and goodwill toward all men.